surgeon at Princess Royal University Hospital. Right, so I think 12 minutes is a short time, so I'm going to stress on some slides, and on others I'll just quickly, hurriedly skip through. Scaphoid fractures. It's a common topic. It's a common injury that we see in our practice, and at some stage or the other, it can be asked in the exam, either a fracture itself or a snack. So important. Right. So it's a hyperextension injury, basically. For example, in footballers, in sort of goalkeepers, uh, motorcyclists, when they have this injury, they're going to have this hyperextension. With the result, the proximal pole of scaphoid, it locks into the radius, distal pole carries on going dorsally, and a fracture happens. When they come to the clinic, so we're going to see these things in the following slides. How you diagnose it, imaging, indications to fix, techniques and approaches of fixation, and types of immobilization. In terms of clinical diagnosis, important in this slide is to appreciate it's an intra-articular fracture. So it's going to result in hemarthrosis, and there'll be a generalized tenderness. And there'll not be a lot of bruising. So like your intracapsular neck of femurs, no bruising, intra-articular hemarthrosis. In terms of X-rays, we're going to see in the next slide what views and what is their importance. But important to appreciate on day one, up to 15-16%, 1 in 6 or 7 patients, X-rays is not, the fracture line is not visible on the X-rays. So if patient has pain in the anatomical snuff box, important is to give them a plaster slam, see them in 2 weeks with a repeat X-ray. And if in doubt, even then get an MRI scan. Idea is not to miss a scaphoid fracture. In terms of X-rays, so this is a PA view to the wrist with ulnar deviation. Importance being, scaphoid will be fully extended in this view, and you can see the whole bone in its entirety. Because as you know, it's a bean-shaped bone, and you want to see the whole length before you tell your patient if there's a fracture or not. Lateral view, only thing to appreciate here is this relationship between the proximal pole of scaphoid and the proximal pole of lunate. So in injuries like scapholunate, where there's a DISI, scaphoid proximal pole will come out of lunate. It will not be sitting in the lunate, if you like. So that's one thing you need to appreciate here. Supination view, only one thing to look at. So if you see the bone there and there, you can appreciate the proximal pole, not so much the distal pole. Important because to make sure your screw is not penetrating the proximal pole. Pronation, other way around, you can appreciate the distal pole. Again, to make sure screw is not proud there. MRI, as I said, if in doubt, get an MRI scan because it can pick up scaphoid edema. It can pick up subtle fractures. It can even tell you some idea about scapholunate ligament injury. Very occasionally, there can be a partial damage to the scapholunate ligament along with the scaphoid fracture. So MRI, CT scan is very important in to diagnose injuries, healing, and for non-union work. So if I have a case where I'm planning a non-union or even an acute fracture, sometimes it's hard to know whether it's a waist or the fracture line is going more towards proximal pole. So CT scan plays a huge role, at least in my practice, in those difficult fracture lines. Displacement, so humpback deformities in a non-union scaphoid, you need to know on your sagittal cuts how much deformity is there, i.e. how much corticocancellous graft you will need. Accordingly, you can tell your patient prognosis. Healing. So for example, in a waist fracture, at 6 weeks, if you can't see, you're not sure about healing in fracture in your x-rays, and patient still has pain, In those cases, you can't indefinitely put patient in a plaster. You will take the plaster out at around 6 weeks in a waist, but get a CT scan because it will give you an idea about bridging trabeculae. Herbert classification, because of time, I'm going to just very quickly go through it. A is basically stable. B starts from your distal pole to waist to proximal pole, then is associated with parilunate injuries, finally a comminuted scaphoid fracture. So I'm sure you all know about it, so I'm going to skip that. Plaster immobilization, your Colles cast is as good as your scaphoid cast. You don't need to include the thumb. Remember that. Plaster length, well, how long is a piece of string? But roughly for a waist, it should be 6 weeks. For a proximal pole or those oblique fractures, it should be a bit more, 10 weeks or thereabouts. Now let's see so this is an exam question, important slide. What are the indications to fix a scaphoid fracture? So all those scaphoid fractures with parilunate injuries, displaced fracture for exam is 1 millimeter, i.e. if you can see a clear fracture line or even a tiny step, that's displaced enough in my books to offer patient a operation. If there are cysts, so intra-articular fractures, cysts can form. That means that fracture is not going to heal. All proximal poles, because there's a 30% chance of non-union, and all those delayed presentations. So it's an injury of young man. This is an injury where sometimes it's mistaken for a sprain, hence delayed presentation. So those are the ones you need to fix and warn patient about a high chance of non-union. Another exam question, undisplaced waist fracture. Whether you want to treat it in a plaster or do you want to offer a percutaneous fixation. So this is a discussion you need to have with your patient in your clinic. Percutaneous fixation, healing will be a bit quicker. Return to work is a bit quicker. But at 2 years, there's no difference according to the evidence. Percutaneous, there are disadvantages also. There's a general anesthetic, theta involved, costing involved. So you need to bring this into discussion with your patients. Percutaneous, if you decide to offer one, this is how you do it. Under your II, you look for tubercle, aim for your wire. Once you've got your wire in the right place, stab incision, wire goes into scaphoid, you measure, take 2 millimeter less, and use any variable pitch screw. Now let's come to open fixation. So for a waist fracture, it's going to be a volar approach. For a proximal pole fracture, is going to be a dorsal approach. So you need to be familiar with both the approaches and the steps for exams. Volar approach, centered over scaphoid tubercle. Other thing to appreciate is this little fellow there, this radioscaphocapitate ligament. Now, if you see this picture, so let's see the incision here. This is how I would do it. You need this much incision to put for your screw in an acute injury, not in a non-union work. And all you do is go straight through skin, fat, through the capsule right onto the bone. So your radioscaphoid ligament is divided into half. But when you repair your capsule in the end, it'll heal up. So one example here, young man, hyperextension injury, and you can see there are cysts already there. You can see the cysts in sagittal cuts. So you know when you curate it out, there will be a gap in the front. So a few slides from my sort of case, volar approach. So in exam, of course, you have to bring into your WHO list, your position, your sort of antibiotics, and then incision, you talk about your incision. And this is sort of me showing, if you like, once I've curated it out, a gap in the scaphoid. So I've taken a corticocancellous graft from radius. Now, important is K-wire should go first. So that is holding both the ends of scaphoid. And then you put your corticocancellous graft. Important, cortical piece should be thin because bone has to resorb before it turns into a graft. And then finally, in my practice, I use a DBX. You can use a bone wax, whatever you prefer. Another example, 46-year-old. This was just showing that you need to get all the 4 X-rays. And important is in your post-op X-rays, you need to have your prono-supination views. That's very important. So as we were talking in pronation, 45-degree pronation view, you need to make sure screw is not prod. In supination, you need to make sure it's not coming out of your proximal pole. Then dorsal approach, again, simple steps, like break it into 3 simple steps. First is your internervous plane. That's your cutaneous nerves. So as you go through skin and fat and make 2 nice flaps, your nerves go through those flaps, with those flaps. So that's your first step. Second is your retinaculum. For exam purpose, you say, I'll go between 3 and 4. So incision is centered over Lester's tubercle between 3 and 4. You partly incise the retinaculum. And then in terms of capsule, in this, you just need to partly incise the capsule to see enough of your scaphoidal lunate. So it's a modified Mayo flap. And your screw penetration, screw will be very, so if that's your lunate, that's scapholunate ligament, screw entry point is very close to lunate, which is what I pointed out here or marked here. So one example of proximal pole, again, young man, hyperextension injury. You can see there's a proximal pole fracture. Always get CT scans if you're worried. In this case, you can see some dorsal spurs. So I know it's a long-standing injury. It's a non-union and dorsal approach. And important, the reason I put 1 year here is in any proximal poles, your final X-ray has to be at 1 year. That's very important. That's the time they go on to heal. Non-union, your signs will be if the fracture line becomes too obvious or if you start seeing cysts, that's not going to heal. So you need to intervene at that stage. Again, if you're shown a non-union X-ray, you can see a gap, cysts, displacements. So those are the things you need to bring into your discussion. Then causes, natural history of scaphoid union, this is important, and then how you treat it. Causes, again, it's an intra-articular fracture. So like your intracapsular neck of femur, increased hydrostatic pressure, and this is how cyst forms, like your geodes form in hip arthritis. And this is the reason why intracapsular neck of femur also doesn't heal up, or one of the reasons at least. And blood supply, another big factor for non-union. Important here, dorsal supply, very important, 70–80%. And all proximal pole comes through dorsal vessels. So bring that into discussion. Now, this is the most important slide of the whole talk. Natural history of scaphoid waist, not proximal pole, waist non-union. So in an unstable waist, is unstable in the long axis, i.e. the forces, the biomechanics that is coming through the wrist. So that's why it collapses into a humpback. I put an X-ray here. Proximal pole, distal pole is collapsed, causing humpback, cysts, and then if you can see dorsal osteophytes and spurs, which will give patient a pain on extension. And these are the ones which will go into SNAC, as opposed to stable waist. So you can see sclerosis there, but because it's stable in long axis in terms of force transmission, all those changes do not happen. It will go into non-union, but very, very rarely into SNAC. So again, further extension to the last slide, natural history of unstable waist. So you can see sort of this is how it starts. And these are the schematic pictures. And because it's unstable, the distal pole keeps tipping down, keeps flexing. So there's a wear of bone in the front, and it sort of, if it's missed, it'll keep tipping down, lots of bone loss, lots of dorsal spurs and osteophytes as seen here. So that's your humpback scaphoid. That's the natural history of progression of a unstable waist into a humpback scaphoid. And this is how you correct it. So waist, volar approach, that's a normal scaphoid, normal intrascaphoid angle, humpback scaphoid, and you gradually correct it, then a K-wire, then a corticocancellous graft, as we saw in those pictures, in the operative pictures. Stable waist, you can see no sclerosis. Eventually sclerosis happens, but it's not going to tip into humpback. There's no snack happening here. A non-union waist scaphoid fracture. So again, sagittal CT is your best friend. You can see it's already tipping into a humpback. So at the time of surgery, you correct it, wire, then you take your graft and you pack it up. Natural history of proximal poles. Now, proximal poles, they are again like a stable waist. They do not go into snack. At the most, they'll be somewhere in the radial styloid, but not a full-blown snack. But proximal pole problem is, if you see sclerosis happens, AVN happens, then fragmentation happens. So these are the ones, for example, this case, again, young man, proximal pole, and you can see some spurring happening. So this is a non-union proximal pole. And again, you go from the dorsal approach, you use your radius graft, cancellous graft, and X-ray has to be 1 year post-op. Last final 2-3 slides. So proximal pole non-union, important is humpback, disc or snack is very rare. Some dorsal spur can happen, as I've shown you in those X-rays. Pain is mostly due to non-union, or because of these spurs, when a patient will extend the wrist, those spurs hits the dorsal rim of radius and they get a sort of kissing lesions, if you like, and spur formation. And sometimes they can get a wear on the radial styloid. So recently I did an arthroscopy on a proximal pole non-union, and there was a lot of wear in the styloid. So all that patient needed was a styloidectomy and a screw fixation for proximal pole non-union. Finally, vascularized grafts for AVN. I haven't done one, at least in my proximal pole non-union work. But yeah, for exam purpose, for completeness sake, think of this 1-2 interretinacular artery and bring it up in the discussion if examiner asks you. And then these are the volar this is how a volar vascularized graft is done. Finally, this is my website. This year I've done 5 sort of FRCS presentations. And if you sort of have time, you can go to the website, click on my YouTube channel or on the lectures. They'll just come up. They're all catered to FRCS, and hopefully it may help you. Thank you very much, and good luck to all of you.